VE, victory in Europe. Mr. Churchill announced it.
We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing. Today is Victory in Europe Day.
Britain took his words to heart. Never was there such a day of genuine rejoicing.
The home of the Mother of Parliaments, focal point of the day. For a moment, we flash back to November 1935. Young England, and those who remember what Gladstone said in 1899, recorded their votes. This was the last time that Britain went to the polls. Election fever ran high, but it's hard to remember if it was as tense as it is today. After 10 years laden with history, the voice of the people is heard once again in party argument.
Put Labour in.
Vote Conservative. Socialism must win. Vote Liberal.
I'm for Churchill.
Attlee's the man.
Posters to the right of them, posters to the left of them, volley and thunder. On July the 5th, the shape and design of post-war living is drawn by the Democratic Cross, which is marked on every voting paper.
The Parliament of 1935 had a big Conservative majority, and the policy pursued by the Conservative government landed this country into war. It was due to the action of the Labour Party that this Conservative government resigned. Mr. Churchill, who had opposed his own party, formed an all-party government which successfully brought us to victory. Now a new Parliament must be elected. The choice is between that same Conservative Party, which stands for private enterprise, private profit and private interests, and the Labour Party, which demands that in peace as in war, the interests of the whole people should come before those of a section. Labour puts first things first. Security from war, food, houses, clothing, employment, leisure and social security for all must come before the claims of the few for more rent, interest and profit. We have shown that we can organize the resources of the country to win the war. We can do the same in peace.
It was sensational. 3 weeks ago or more, when you recorded your votes, very few of you would have prophesied a working majority for Labour, much less one of about 200 seats. How did it happen? Was it the forces' vote? Rumour had it that the men and women of the services favoured Labour, but no one knew, the ballot being secret, overseas no less than in Britain itself. July the 26th, they counted them. Here in the Limehouse division, it was no change, and Mr. Attlee expressed his thanks.
The rest of the country will do as well as the borough of Stepney. The country will have done very well for itself.
Gradually, it began to be clear that the rest of the country was doing a step. Newspapers carried the astonishing news to an amazed public, for let's face it, whoever imagined such a result? And slowly the moral of it all struck home. Labour landslide.
Here is the state of parties up to 3 o'clock in detail. Conservatives, 180. Labour, 364.
At East Lewisham, Mr. Herbert Morrison was elected and gave his interpretation of the result.
I personally have always thought that there was no necessary antagonism between Labour and what are known as the middle classes. East Lewisham is a mixed division of working class folk and middle class folk. And we have shown here, as will be shown in other places, that the middle classes need not necessarily be antagonistic to Labour. The news is that there is a big swing to the left throughout London and probably throughout the country in this election.
And outside Transport House, the headquarters of the Labour Party, Mr. Attlee summed up for Movietone the situation as it appeared to a man about to be Prime Minister.
the sweeping victories throughout the country mark an epoch in the political life of this country. And never before have the electors shown clearly their desire that there should be in this country a Labour government carrying out Labour's full policy. I am certain that this election has been one in which the electors have thought deeply on the fundamental questions of the future, and they realize that Labour is the party of the future and that Labour's policy is the only policy that can lead us to peace abroad and social justice at home. The Labour Party's great victory shows that the country is ready for a new policy to face new world conditions, that it believes that Labour has the right policy and also has the men to carry it out.
He was educated at Haileybury and Oxford, and a school group shows him as a young public school boy on the extreme right. An eminent friend who was at school with him has said he was regarded as the most reliable boy there. Later, as a young man, he took a great interest and played a big part in social welfare work in London's East End. Old pictures taken at about that time show the sort of conditions that so deeply moved him. It was as a result of his work among the people here that he became a lifelong socialist, devoted to the aims of the social revolution which has in fact taken place in the 20th century. He served in the army in World War I with the South Lancashire Regiment and the Tank Corps in Gallipoli, Mesopotamia and France. He was wounded and reached the rank of major. In 1922, at the age of 39, he sat in Parliament as member for Limehouse. His political progress was rapid, in spite of the unassuming modesty which has always been so conspicuous a feature of his life. In the Second World War, he served as Deputy Prime Minister. No one, perhaps, could have been of so opposing a character and yet worked so harmoniously with war leader Churchill. When victory was achieved, he had played a great part in winning it, though from the public point of view, of course, he had been in the background. After victory in Europe, the end of the national government, and the King sent for him when Labour had been returned to power. He headed the first Labour government with a clear majority, but he and his cabinet faced formidable tasks, both in domestic and foreign policy. He led for Great Britain at the Potsdam Conference, where the immensely difficult problems of an immediate post-war settlement between East and West had to be worked out. Many of the results of Potsdam are apparent today. Certainly it's far better known today how impossibly difficult negotiations with Soviet Russia can be. Mr. Truman was then President of the United States, and he and Mr. Attlee were confronted with Stalin, who must already have been planning the Cold War, which has continued almost unabated ever since.
You have only to run through the list of Conservative members in the House of Commons and of their candidates standing for the safer seats to see that they belong to two classes only, those who are born rich and those who have achieved riches. You would look in vain for anyone from the wage-earning classes. The nearest approach to it will be someone who in his remote youth worked for a weekly wage. In the Labour Party, on the contrary, you will find a remarkable range of experience. There are employers as well as workers, farmers, practical working farmers, as well as farm workers. There are writers and printers, working engineers and managing directors of engineering works, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and men from the merchant navy, scientists and artists, teachers and professors, and women of varied experience.
The strong character of Ernest Bevin has been one of the outstanding influences in British politics and indeed in world politics during these post-war years.
From nothing, he rose to be great and yet keep the faith of the small. The general strike brought him to Downing Street as spokesman for the union he had built. But when Churchill called him to be Minister of Labour in the war, he rose to his greatest heights.
Ever since Potsdam, his robust personality has been a tower of strength at those interminable conferences which demanded so much patience and tenacity. To Mr. Bevin's eternal credit, he at once recognized the importance of the offer of General Marshall, which led to martial aid. That he was a great Labour leader goes without saying, and as his friend the Prime Minister has recorded, he was at his best in addressing big gatherings of trade unionists, such as the TUC.
I want Britain to stand and revive and come back, and I can only do it if you come forward.
Yes, he spoke up for Britain. And in the gatherings of foreign statesmen, he spoke up for those British ideals which were always so close to his heart.
Universal peace, universal brotherhood, and the means to settle all disputes without resort to force.
At last, Labour is in power in Britain, and here are some members of the new government. The Prime Minister and Sir Stafford Cripps. Mr. Attlee's pipe is as constant as Mr. Churchill's cigar. The round, smiling face is an Aaron Bevins. He's got to get those houses built. In the middle here, Mr. Whitecliffe, Chief Whip. Ben Smith, once a taxi driver, now Food Minister, with Arthur Greenwood. They're in the garden at 10 Downing Street. You can pick out faces you know. There's Bevin, Foreign Secretary, a strong man in a tough job. The bald head on the right is Hugh Dalton, Chancellor of the Exchequer. Chief figure in many famous trials is now Lord Chancellor Jowett. Here he is with Cripps. Ellen Wilkinson, Tutor Reid, Home Secretary. Alexander, once more First Lord of the Admiralty. No captions needed here. The press call them Labour's Big Three. At the back, an Aaron Bevan, and next to him, the man behind demobilization, George Isaacs, Minister of Labour. See that chap behind Attlee and Morrison? Jack Lawson of the War Office. He's just off to Burma to see for himself. Next but one to Lawson is Shinwell. His big job is to take over the coal mines and get the coal. A strong team. The nation wishes them well in their tremendous task.
Like his father, he started life as a mine worker, but he rose to become a Minister of the Crown.
The man the Labour Party sacked when he campaigned against appeasement became a minister when the party was in power. First Health, then Labour. He was Labour Minister when his own government began, as he saw it, to water down the health service he had done so much to build. His resignation was characteristic, for Nye Bevan feared neither friend nor foe when his principles were at stake.
I'm proud about the National Health Service. It's a piece of real socialism. What I had in mind when we organized the National Health Service in 1946 to 1958, and remember when we did it, you know, you younger ones, this is immediately after the end of the Second World War, when we realized Sir Winston Churchill then said, a bankrupt nation. But nevertheless, we did these things. And there is nowhere in any nation in the world, communist or capitalist, any health service to compare with it.
The crucial question on which every elector must make up his or her mind is this: what kind of society do you want? Well, we know the kind of society we want. We want a society of free men and women, free from poverty, free from fear, able to develop to the full their faculties in cooperation with their fellows. Everyone giving and having the opportunity to give service to the community. Everyone regarding his own private interest in the light of the interests of others, in the light of the interests of the community. A society bound together by rights and obligations. Rights bringing obligations. Obligations fulfill bringing rights. A society free from gross inequalities. and yet not regimented, not uniform. Let's go forward into this fight in the spirit of William Blake. I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall the sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land.